It was a typical morning in the small town where Malik lived. The sun had barely risen, and the streets were still quiet. Malik, a young black kid with big dreams and a small pocket of hope, was heading out to run some errands. He had a part-time job at the local grocery store, but today was different. He had no particular reason to be excited, but there was something about the air, something that felt like change was just around the corner. As he made his way down the street, his eyes caught something unusual. A motorcycle parked in the middle of the road, its engine rumbling softly as if it had a story to tell. It was a big bike, the kind you'd only see in movies, dark, powerful, and intimidating. But what stood out more than the motorcycle was the woman standing next to it. She looked rough, her leather jacket weathered from years on the road, and her face was covered with tattoos that told stories of places and battles fought. She wasn't someone you'd expect to see in a quiet town like this. Malik slowed his pace, unsure of what to do. The woman was struggling with the bike, her hands working on the engine. But there was a frustration in the way she moved. It was clear she wasn't used to being stuck. Normally, Malik would have just walked on by. But something about this woman intrigued him. She looked like someone who didn't take kindly to help, someone who didn't want to be bothered. But still, something pulled him toward her. "Need some help?" Malik asked, his voice unsure but friendly. The woman looked up, her eyes narrowing as she sized him up. She didn't answer immediately, and for a second, Malik thought she might tell him to get lost. But instead, she grunted, wiping the sweat off her forehead. "Got a flat tire. Don't have the tools to fix it," she muttered, looking around, as if expecting someone else to show up. Malik didn't have much experience with motorcycles, but he knew a thing or two about fixing things. He had helped his mom with car repairs and had spent a lot of time tinkering with old bikes in his spare time. He looked at the tire, then back at the woman. "I can give it a shot," he said, more to himself than to her. The woman studied him for a moment, clearly surprised. She wasn't used to people offering help, especially not someone like Malik. People in town often kept their distance from outsiders, and a kid like him offering help to a tough, road-worn biker was unheard of. But there was something in his eyes, a sincerity that made her pause. "All right, kid, go ahead," she said, moving aside. Malik knelt down, rummaging through his backpack for some tools he always carried with him. He wasn't sure he could do it, but he wanted to try. The woman watched him closely, her arms crossed. But for the first time since they'd met, she wasn't glaring at him. She was actually waiting. He worked quickly, using what little he had to patch up the tire. As he did, he noticed something odd about the woman. She wasn't like the people in town. There was a strength to her, something beyond just the muscles she carried. It was in the way she moved, in the way she didn't speak much but still commanded attention without trying. She seemed like someone who had lived through things, seen the worst of the world, and yet still had a fire in her. It wasn't often Malik came across people like that. After a few minutes, Malik stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. The tire was as good as new. He could tell the woman was impressed, but she didn't say much. Instead, she simply gave him a small nod. "You did good, kid," she said, her voice softer than before. Malik smiled, feeling a rush of pride, but he didn't let it show too much. It was just a tire. After all, still, there was something special about helping someone who didn't expect it. "No problem. Glad I could help," he said, trying to act cool. The woman grabbed her helmet and placed it on her head. She started the engine, the deep sound vibrating in the air. Before she took off, she looked back at him one last time. "Thanks, you've got guts, kid. Don't forget that," she said, her tone now a bit warmer than when they first met. With that, she revved the engine, and within seconds, the motorcycle roared to life, sending her speeding down the street, leaving a trail of dust behind. Malik stood there for a moment, watching her disappear. He wasn't sure what had just happened, but somehow, he felt like his life had just changed. Maybe it was the way she had looked at him, or maybe it was just the fact that someone like her had shown him respect. Malik didn't know it yet, but that small act of kindness helping a stranger in need was about to open up a world he never could have imagined. He didn't realize it at the time, but he had just met someone who would change the course of his life forever. And as he stood there, watching the dust settle, he couldn't help but wonder what kind of adventure lay ahead. The next morning, Malik woke up to a world that felt strangely different. The air was still thick with the quiet hum of the town, but there was a strange sense of anticipation in the atmosphere, something that tugged at him. He had hardly slept the night before, his mind replaying the encounter with the woman, the Hell's Angel, and wondering about the life she led. Who was she really? What was her story, and why had she seemed so different? There was something about her, a mystery that lingered in the air, unanswered and unshaken. As he walked into the kitchen, his mom was already busy with breakfast, humming a quiet tune. Malik grabbed a cereal box from the shelf, his thoughts still miles away. He glanced out the window, half expecting to see the woman on her motorcycle again. But there was nothing, just the usual quiet streets and the occasional car driving by. He let out a sigh, pushing the thought aside. But as he stepped outside, the scene before him took his breath away. It was like something straight out of a movie. There, in front of his house, were motorcycles, hundreds of them. The sight was almost overwhelming. Motorcycles of all shapes and sizes lined the street, their engines humming in unison, creating a low, rumbling sound that shook the ground beneath Malik's feet. The riders, all wearing leather jackets and bandanas, were everywhere, some leaning against their bikes, others chatting in groups, and a few just observing. They weren't just a few bikers. They were an entire army. Malik froze, his mouth going dry, his heart raced in his chest, and for a moment, he thought maybe he was dreaming. He pinched his arm hard. Nope, not a dream. Malik, get over here. His mom called from the front door, her voice tense. Malik quickly turned and saw her standing there, looking as shocked as he felt. She was staring at the bikers, her eyes wide with confusion. What is this? Malik asked, his voice shaky. Who are they? Before his mom could answer, a voice rang out from the crowd of bikers. Yo, kid. The voice was deep, rough, with a kind of authority that made everyone around him stand a little taller. Malik turned to see the woman from the day before, Grace, walking toward him. But she wasn't alone. She was surrounded by bikers, all of them watching him like he was the center of attention. Grace, the Hell's Angel, gave him a small nod. As she approached, "You the one who helped me yesterday?" Malik blinked, trying to process everything. Yeah, that was me. But what is this? Why are all these people here? Grace chuckled, a sound that was almost too loud for the quiet town. This, kid, is what we call a thank you party. Malik was still trying to figure out what exactly that meant when Grace continued. You helped me when nobody else would, and for that, you deserve some respect. She motioned to the group of bikers behind her, all of whom were still watching him with silent attention. As if on cue, the bikers began to cheer and clap, some even revving their engines in approval. Malik felt his stomach twist with a mix of confusion and awe. Why were they all here? What did he have to do with any of this? We don't forget our own, Grace added, her tone much softer now. You helped me, and now we're here to return the favor. Before Malik could respond, a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped forward from the crowd. He was older, his face lined with years of road wear and hard living, and his leather vest was decorated with patches that screamed loyalty to the Hell's Angels. His eyes locked onto Malik's, assessing him like he was weighing his worth. The man grinned, showing a set of sharp teeth. We're all here because of you, kid, he said, his voice booming. You showed respect when you didn't have to. Now we owe you one. Malik was stunned. He felt like he was in a dream, watching the entire town turn into something else, a wild, free, untamed world he had never imagined. He had helped one person, and now, suddenly, it felt like he had joined something much bigger than himself. Grace caught his confused look and raised an eyebrow. You didn't think helping a Hell's Angel would be so simple, did you? Malik shook his head, trying to make sense of it all. I don't understand. What do you mean? I just fixed your bike. I didn't ask for this. Grace's gaze softened as she placed a hand on his shoulder. You don't have to ask for something like this, kid. Sometimes being kind is all it takes to change everything. With a final look of approval from the tall man, Grace turned to Malik once more. We're here to show you what family looks like. And trust me, it's a lot bigger than you think." As she said that, the crowd of bikers began to form a circle around him, welcoming him into their world without saying another word. Malik stood there, frozen for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea what was coming next, but he could feel the weight of the decision he had just made. There was no turning back now. And as Grace revved her motorcycle and began to lead the pack down the street, Malik knew that his life, the life he had always known, was never going to be the same. He had just stepped into a world of danger, loyalty, and a bond he couldn't yet understand. But something told him it was just the beginning. The next few days felt like a blur. Malik was still trying to come to terms with what had happened. One moment, he was just a regular kid helping out a stranger, and the next, he was somehow tangled up in the world of Hell's Angels. It wasn't just the bikes, or the leather jackets, or the tattoos that confused him. It was the way they all seemed to accept him without question, like he was part of their world now, like he belonged. Grace had become a sort of mentor to him, taking him under her wing. She would pop by his house every now and then, always bringing along a few of the others' riders with names like Whiskey and Bear. They'd show up, loud and unapologetic, each time in a whirlwind of engines and laughter. To Malik, it was a world he'd never imagined, a far cry from the small-town life he was used to. Grace's lessons were simple at first. She taught him how to ride a bike, how to take care of one, how to handle the rough roads. But it wasn't just about bikes. It was about understanding the people in this world, the bikers who lived by their own rules, who valued loyalty above all else. Malik was no fool. He saw the unspoken code that governed their lives. The Hells Angels were a family, a tight-knit unit that had each other's backs no matter what. They didn't judge, they didn't ask questions. You helped them, they helped you. It was that simple. One evening, Grace picked him up for a ride, a quiet invitation that Malik couldn't resist. The air was crisp, the streets empty, and the rumble of the motorcycle beneath him felt like a heartbeat, sensing with his own. He had no idea where they were going, but he trusted Grace. "You've got guts, kid," she said as they cruised through the winding roads. Not everyone would step up to help a stranger like you did. Most people would have just walked on by. Malik didn't know what to say. All he had done was fix a flat tire, something anyone could have done. But to Grace and her crew, it had meant something more. It was a rare thing, kindness in a world that often didn't show it. As they rode, Malik couldn't help but feel the pull of this new life. There was something about the freedom of the open road, about the wind against his face, and the sound of the engines roaring through the night. It was different from the quiet streets he had known, different from the safe predictability of his old life. Eventually, Grace pulled over to a deserted parking lot at the edge of town, one that Malik had never noticed before. It was dark, the only light coming from the moon above and the distant glow of the city. Grace shut off the engine, and the sudden silence was deafening. "This is where the real test begins," she said, looking at him seriously. "You helped me once. Now, you've got to prove yourself to the rest of the club. You've got to show them you've got what it takes to ride with us." Malik's stomach dropped. A test. He wasn't sure what she meant, but the weight of her words made his palms sweat. Grace's eyes softened a bit. "Don't worry, it's not about fighting or anything like that. It's about trust. Can we trust you? Can you stand by us when it counts? That's what this is about. And there's only one way to find out." Before Malik could respond, the sound of engines grew louder as the rest of the bikers rolled in, surrounding the lot. Whiskey, Bear, and the others dismounted their bikes, their faces unreadable. "What's going on?" Malik asked, his voice uncertain. Grace grinned. "You're about to find out." The bikers circled around him, eyes on him now, not with judgment, but with a kind of quiet expectancy. Grace stepped forward, her face serious. "There's a lot more to being one of us than just helping out. You've got to prove that you belong. And there's a simple way to do that." With a motion of her hand, one of the bikers rolled forward a heavy-looking chain. Malik's heart skipped a beat as he realized what they were doing. The chain wasn't for anything violent. It was a test of his ability to hold his ground, a symbol of the bond they all shared. It was their way of seeing if he was truly ready for what came next. "You're going to have to drag this across the lot," Grace said. Simple. But it's not just about strength, it's about endurance. It's about pushing yourself, even when you think you can't go any further. "Can you do that?" Malik stood there, staring at the chain. It looked heavy, but the challenge wasn't the weight, it was the pressure to succeed. The weight of their eyes on him. "I can do it," Malik said, taking a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. Grace nodded, and with a signal, the bikers stepped back, giving him space. The chain felt heavier than he expected as he gripped it, dragging it across the lot. His arms burned, his legs screamed for him to stop, but he didn't. He pushed forward, determined to prove himself. Sweat poured down his face, and his heart raced. The sounds of the bikers faded into the background, their eyes no longer just watching, now they were waiting. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Malik reached the other end of the lot. His body was shaking, his breath ragged, but he had done it. He had pushed through. Grace stepped forward, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Not bad, kid, not bad at all." The bikers started to clap, some nodding in approval. Malik couldn't believe it. He had done it. He had passed the test, but more than that, he had earned their respect. Grace walked over to him, her face still serious but with a hint of pride. "You've got what it takes. But remember this, Malik, in this world, we don't just ride for the thrill, we ride for each other. And that's the real test." As they all mounted their bikes again and roared off into the night, Malik knew his life had changed forever. He wasn't just a kid from a quiet town anymore. He was part of something bigger, something wild, and he was ready for whatever came. Next. Malik couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming. The night after his test, he couldn't sleep. His mind kept racing, replaying the events of the day, wondering if he had really earned his place in this world. He had passed the test, sure. He had proven his endurance, his strength. But what did it really mean? Was he in for the long haul? Or was this just some fleeting moment of excitement? The next morning, Grace showed up at his door. As if on cue, there was no knocking, just the familiar roar of her motorcycle. She parked in front of his house, the engine still running, as she took off her helmet and looked at him with that same unreadable expression. "You ready for the next step?" she asked, her voice calm but carrying an edge of something deeper, something serious. Malik wasn't sure what she meant. He had thought the test was the hard part, but this felt different. "What's next?" he asked, stepping out onto the porch. Grace looked at him, her eyes scanning the town behind him before turning back to him. "There's a job," she said, "one that needs doing. It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be clean, but it's part of the life you've chosen, and it's time for you to step up." Malik swallowed, his stomach twisted with a mix of excitement and fear. He had no idea what kind of job she was talking about. What could a group like the Hells Angels want from a kid like him? She continued, "You've learned to ride. You've learned the code. Now it's time to prove that you can handle the weight of this life." The way she said it, like he had no choice but to follow through, sent a chill down his spine. He nodded slowly, trying to hide the nervousness that threatened to spill over. "What do I have to do?" Grace's expression softened for a brief moment. "It's not about what you do, kid. It's about standing by us when it counts. This is more than a favor. It's about loyalty. That's the heart of this life." Before Malik could respond, the familiar roar of engines filled the air. One by one, the other bikers rolled in, Whiskey, Bear, and the rest of the crew. They were all there, ready for something serious. Grace motioned for Malik to get on the back of her bike. "Come on, we're heading out." As they sped off, the streets blurred past him. His hands gripped the sides of Grace's bike, his mind racing. He had never been more aware of the weight of his decisions. There was no going back now. Whatever was coming, he had already chosen this life. The sounds of the roaring engines, the wind whipping through his hair, it all felt real now. He wasn't just an outsider anymore. He was part of something. They arrived at a secluded spot just outside of town, an old warehouse tucked away in a forgotten corner. The place looked abandoned, its windows covered in grime and the doors rusted shut. A few of the bikers were already there, unloading crates from the back of a van. There was a nervous energy in the air, something unspoken, but palpable. Malik followed Grace as she led him inside. The dim light inside flickered overhead, and the smell of dust and old wood filled his nose. It wasn't the kind of place anyone would want to be caught in, and it was clear from the looks on the bikers' faces that they knew something was about to go down. "All right," Grace said, turning to Malik, "this is where you prove yourself. The job is simple. Make sure everything goes smoothly. Don't ask questions. Just do what you're told." He nodded, though his stomach was in knots. He wasn't sure what kind of job they were talking about, but the tension in the room told him it wasn't going to be just a delivery. As if reading his thoughts, Grace added, "There's a rival gang in this town, kid, and they've been trying to move in on our turf. This is a warning, a show of power. You do your part, and you'll earn your place here. You don't, and you'll be gone. Simple as that." Malik's heart began to pound. This wasn't what he had imagined. He had thought he'd be hanging out with bikers, riding through the open roads, living free. But this was real, and it was dangerous. He glanced at the crates being unloaded. Inside, he could see weapons, guns, knives, and other things he had never seen before. This wasn't just a show of power. It was a message, and Malik was about to be a part of it. Grace walked over to him, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "You've got two choices now. You can walk away, pretend this was all a mistake, or you can stay and show that you're one of us. No turning back, though. Not now, not ever." Malik felt the weight of her words sink in. There was no going back now. He had already made his choice the moment he decided to help Grace with that tire. The life he was stepping into wasn't one of just freedom and adventure. It was a life of loyalty, power, and consequences. He took a deep breath. "I'm in," he said. His voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. He had made his choice, and now there was no turning back. Grace's lips curled into a small smile. "Good. Now let's get to work." The crew began moving with purpose, organizing the weapons and preparing for whatever was about to go down. Malik stood with them, his heart racing, knowing that this moment would define everything that came after it. The world he had stepped into was dark, dangerous, and unpredictable, but it was his world now, and he was ready. The days following Malik's initiation into the world of the Hells Angels were a whirlwind. The quiet town he once knew felt distant, almost foreign now. He had crossed a line, stepping into a life that few could understand, much less navigate. It wasn't just about the thrill of the ride anymore. There was a weight to it, a constant pressure that hung over him, always reminding him that loyalty came at a cost. He had done his part during the job, staying in the background, following orders, and keeping quiet. But as the dust settled after the encounter with the rival gang, Malik knew he hadn't just survived that night. He had changed. The people around him, the bikers who had once seemed so distant, were now a part of his world. Grace had made him see that it wasn't just about earning respect. It was about being willing to stand by those who trusted you, even when it meant putting yourself in danger. A week later, Grace called him again, her voice gruff over the phone. "Meet me at the old bar by the docks. I need to talk to you." The urgency in her voice made Malik's stomach twist. He didn't ask questions. He knew better by now. When he arrived at the bar, the familiar roar of motorcycles greeted him. Grace was already there, standing near the entrance, her posture tense, her eyes scanning the area like a hawk. The usual crew was there too: Whiskey, Bear, and a few others looking more serious than usual. The air felt thick with tension, as if something was about to explode. "What's going on?" Malik asked, walking up to Grace. She turned to him, her eyes narrowing. "We've got a problem, Malik. It's not over yet. The rival gang's not backing down. They're making moves, and we've got to act before they strike first." Malik's pulse quickened. This wasn't just some petty conflict. It was turning into a full-blown war. He could feel the weight of it in the pit of his stomach, and he knew that this time there would be no stepping back. It was either fight or be left behind. Grace placed a hand on his shoulder, looking him square in the eyes. "You've earned your place here, kid. But this is the real test. We're going to have to take the fight to them. It's not going to be clean. But if you're in, you've got to commit. No hesitating, no turning back." Malik nodded, feeling the finality of her words sink in. He had already chosen this life, and there was no way out now. He wasn't the same kid who had fixed a flat tire for a stranger. That moment had set everything in motion, and now, the only thing that mattered was loyalty to the family that had accepted him. The bikers started to gear up, checking their bikes, adjusting their leathers. The sounds of engines revving filled the air, but there was no excitement in it. This wasn't a joyride. This was war. Grace leaned in closer, lowering her voice so only Malik could hear. You ready for this? It's not about what happens to you, it's about making sure the crew comes out on top. The gravity of her words hit Malik harder than anything before. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the people around him. It was about making sure they all got out alive. He had a role to play, and he knew it. He wasn't just some kid caught up in a wild ride. He was a part of something bigger, a brotherhood, a family. "Ayman," Malik said, his voice steady despite the rush of fear that threatened to take over. "I'll do what I have to." Grace gave him a small smile, one that was both approving and wary. "Good. Now let's show them why they made a mistake messing with us." The ride to the rival gang's hideout was silent, the sound of the bike's engines filling the night air. Every bump in the road felt like a warning. Every twist and turn a reminder that this wasn't just a choice, it was a commitment to something that could cost him everything. The further they went, the closer they came to the heart of the danger. As they reached the rival gang's compound, the group slowed, the atmosphere tense. Grace looked over her shoulder at Malik, her face unreadable. "Stay close. Do your job. Don't make a move unless I say so." Malik nodded, gripping the handlebars tighter. The compound ahead was quiet, but he knew better than to assume that meant anything. He had learned that when it came to the Hells Angels, silence was the calm before the storm. Grace motioned for them to dismount, and they moved swiftly but quietly toward the building. The air was thick with the smell of gasoline and adrenaline, and Malik's heart hammered in his chest. He had never been this close to danger before, not like this. They reached the door, and Grace nodded to Whiskey, who pushed it open. Inside, a handful of men from the rival gang were gathered, their backs to the door. The tension in the room was palpable, but there was no turning back now. This was it. Grace stepped forward, her voice low but commanding. "We're here to settle this. Now, you had your chance to back off, but you didn't, and now you'll pay the price." The room went dead silent. Malik felt the eyes of the rival gang members on him, sizing him up. They didn't know who he was, just another kid in a leather jacket. But they would soon learn. Then, as if on cue, the rival gang leader stood up, his expression cold and unflinching. "You think you can just waltz in here and threaten us? You've got another thing coming." And just like that, the standoff began. Malik could feel the weight of the moment, the tension stretching tighter than ever before. This wasn't just about loyalty anymore, it was about survival. And in this world, survival meant standing your ground. It meant protecting your family at all costs. Malik took a deep breath. The fight had just begun, and he was ready.